Hey everyone, I'm Tom.
And I'm Kate.
And welcome to another Mondays with the Mortons. It's Monday and we're hoping you're having an excellent week.
We are coming to you this week from Lake Havasu City, Arizona.
Again.
Yep,
we're back here.
We started off the week in Sedona. We hung out with the Freedom Theory a little bit.
Yeah, we met up with them again and did some hiking and saw a little bit more of Sedona before parting ways for good this time. They're heading east and we're heading west.
Yep, so we headed back this way towards Lake Havasu.
By way of Flagstaff.
Yep, and we stopped. We were hoping to see the Grand Canyon briefly. We've been there before, but we wanted to see it again, and it just didn't work out because it was really cold and
raining, dumping rain, and even starting to snow.
Yeah.
But we did meet up with some other full-time friends of ours up in Flagstaff for the night, a cold, windy night. But then we headed down here to Lake Havasu where it's warm and dry again, which is nice.
Yep, and this is a stop before we continue towards Southern California. So going back to California before we start heading north. On our drive over here from Sedona, we encountered a kind of scary situation. We were going uphill towards Flagstaff from Sedona area, and we saw this like billowing black smoke on the horizon.
Yeah, it looked like a tire fire. It was a huge billowing clouds, and as we got closer, we realized it was an RV.
Yep.
And
truck towing a fifth wheel.
The truck towing a fifth wheel, and it was just billowing black smoke, and
much smoke that it like engulfed the entire thing.
I had a pretty good idea what was going on with this guy, and right as we passed him, we got to an emergency pull-off, and he pulled off, and we went and looked at it, and sure enough, his turbo manifold, the pressurized air off the turbo from the engine had popped. It had disconnected, and he lost turbo pressure to the engine, so he was dumping fuel into the engine, and with hardly any air to burn it, so it was just causing massive amounts of smoke. It
was not something that could be repaired on the roadside by him and us, so they were going to have to call roadside assistance, which luckily they had, and it was going to be fine.
But they had a long way to go. They're headed to Michigan. So.
Yeah.
So after seeing that, I quickly wanted to get into our engine and check everything, and that brought us to something we wanted to talk about this week, is just commonly overlooked maintenance items that could cause extensive damage, catastrophic failure, or even a safety concern to you or your loved ones. So here's a list of some commonly overlooked things that we think are worth looking at to try and help prevent something going wrong. You can't always catch everything, but if you look at these things regularly, you can hopefully prevent something like this from going wrong. So we tow with a truck, but this is applicable to both Class A motorhomes or even most vehicles on the road. We're going to start by taking a look under the hood. So this isn't really commonly overlooked, but you're going to want to always be checking your fluids. Make sure to check your engine oil, your transmission, your coolant, your brake fluid, your power steering fluid, and any other fluids in your vehicle. Make sure they're topped off and make sure that they are relatively fresh. Vehicles that tow or Class A's, they have a lot more load on the engine. Things get hotter, and a lot of times fluids you really got to stay up on them to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Also in the engines, be sure to occasionally check your hoses. Make sure to grab rubber hoses, make sure that nothing's cracking or looks like it's getting old, and it's a good idea to every 10 to 15 years replace hoses and lines like your coolant hoses that could commonly they get old, the rubber gets old, and they crack and can break and leave you stranded on the side of the road. Also check all of your filters. Modern engines have lots of filters on them. Your air filter is one of the most common and well known, but there's lots of other filters on engines like your fuel filter. Under this thing on this truck is our crankcase ventilation filter, and that is one that actually caused $1,600 worth of damage on our truck because it clogged up. Also think about your transmission. It has filters in it that a lot of times need to be changed every so often. On this truck it's about every 70,000 miles they recommend it, and when you do that you also drain a portion of the transmission fluid out so you get some new transmission fluid in there. So make sure to think about filters across the board and keep up to date on them so they don't clog up and cause problems. That thing right there, that's your differential. That needs to be maintained. In our travels we've seen 2 instances where the differential has failed and even caught fire on RVs and trucks. and people forget about that. Bunch of gears in there, needs to be maintained. I did a video on how to change your oil on that. Get under your truck or RV and look at your suspension components occasionally. Look at your steering and your ball joints, and make sure everything's tight and not falling apart. If you don't know how to do this, when you get your tires changed and an alignment done, it's a good idea to ask the mechanic to look over everything. Make sure all your bushings and everything are okay, because once these things can loosen up, they can rattle apart and cause serious problems on the road. Occasionally check your brakes and brake lines on your RV, whether it's air, hydraulic, or electric like this. Occasionally check your lines, make sure nothing's wearing incorrectly and that your shoes are properly adjusted on your trailers. Also, on a trailer like this, a lot of times you need to remove the bearings and occasionally repack the bearings with grease. Not so much on Class A's, but on almost all trailers out there, the bearings need to be packed occasionally. For those that have a propane electric fridge, not the residential style, but the style that works on propane or electric, be sure to take the outside cover off occasionally and look in here and make sure that you don't have leaves or buildup in this area right here, because behind this little thing is an open flame, and that flame is what cools the fridge. Birds and leaves and stuff can get in here and build up and cause a fire hazard, and it's actually a very common cause of RV fires. In fact, in our journeys we did come across some folks that had lost their RV. They were full-time on the road. They lost everything that they owned because of this exact problem. So be sure to get in here occasionally and check for buildup. Make sure you don't have a fire hazard in your fridge. A lot of people tend to forget about their batteries as well, especially on an RV with flooded lead acid batteries. You need to occasionally remove this and look in here, make sure that your cells have water over the top of them. It needs to be distilled water. And we neglected our original batteries that were in this. These are 6 volts, they were 12 volts before. We had a horrible sulfur smell one day, and we came out and our batteries were burning hot. They were about to practically catch fire, it felt like. We had to immediately remove them and get new batteries. So they again can be a fire hazard or even an explosion hazard because they cause off-gassing, hydrogen gas. So you need to make sure to keep on top of these because they can be extremely dangerous if you neglect them. So we're under the slides now, and this is another thing that you need to keep up on. There's lots of different slide types out there, but they almost all need some grease underneath here. And you also want to keep the rubber around it relatively clean. And on this type of slide, it actually pops up, and there's a big plastic piece under here. You want to make sure to keep that clean. Getting grit and dirt in there can put a lot of pressure on these as they come in and out and break things, and it's much easier to try to prevent a problem than fix problems on these slides. So in your hot water heater, you've got an anode. It's usually in the drain valve. When you remove this, you get a big rod in there. That needs to be replaced occasionally. That anode is in there to protect the water heater from being corroded by electrostatic forces that are just naturally occur. This is in residential water heaters as well, and tank style. Tankless doesn't have this, but it needs to be replaced occasionally or you will rust a hole in the side of your tank and you'll have a big watery mess. So we're on the roof of the RV now, and I highly recommend that you spend some time up here and really get to know your roof. You want to be always looking for any tears or cracks in your roof. Going through campgrounds and areas, you'll frequently, I mean, this is a rubber roof, you can easily get a tear in it from a stick or something. Come up here regularly, be careful because you're way up here, and just look it over and make sure that you don't have any tears or holes. Also re-caulk things regularly, and you can see we got a little patch here that this had cracked, and this is just some Eternabond and some lap sealant around it. It's what we like to use for quick patch jobs on our roof. But you just want to make sure that you're always looking at things, and a small tear can get water in it slowly over time and do some serious damage inside the RV before you know it's there. So highly recommend getting up on the roof and looking it over regularly to prevent water ingress and damage. Along the lines of checking your roof, you're also going to want to watch for any seams along the outside of your RV and check for leakage that you might not be able to see a crack on the outside. A lot of times it happens really small and you can't actually see it. So check on the floors around the walls anytime it's raining. Make sure to check for any leaks regularly. And if you do find one, try to figure out where the water's coming from. As you can see, I've kind of got a lot of caulk and stuff in this corner because this is one spot we did have a little leak, and we patched it as soon as we could to prevent damage to the wall and the floor inside. So inside the RV, if something does go wrong, you're going to want to catch it as soon as possible. So propane detectors, very common in RVs because we've got propane on board. Make sure to replace them every 5 years. They're only good for 5 years and they'll start flaking out. Also carbon monoxide detectors and also fire alarms. Make sure to check them regularly. Replace batteries if needed, and make sure they're working for your own safety.
So this is by no means a comprehensive list of things that you should check. This is a list that we've been putting together kind of loosely over our travels, and after seeing that incident the other day on the road, we thought that we should at least try to share some of our knowledge. If you guys have anything to add to this list, please share it in the comments below, and we can add it to the description so that we can kind of grow a community list to hopefully help each other out and prevent any big breakdowns.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you have any other questions or topics you'd like us to discuss, please leave them in the comments below as well. Subscribe if you haven't, and we will see you next week on another Mondays with the Mortons.
Bye.